Look closely at the screen next to me. It is a Tuesday in Beijing. A spokesperson walks to a podium in a brightly lit room. They look down at their perfectly organized notes. They take questions from a room full of journalists. They read prepared answers in a flat, monotone, almost robotic voice. The cameras roll. The reporters type out their quick summaries. The wire services, Reuters, AP, Bloomberg, publish 3 boring paragraphs about diplomatic platitudes. The morning news anchors read a 15-second summary, and the world moves on to the next flashy, high-adrenaline story. That is what the world thinks happened at China's foreign ministry briefing this week. It is also completely, catastrophically wrong, because what actually happened in that room was not a standard press briefing. That spokesperson did not just stand at that podium to answer daily questions. They stood at that podium and delivered a master plan, a strategic blueprint. They delivered a point-by-point declaration of how China intends to completely and irreversibly reshape the global order, right while America is busy enforcing a naval blockade in the Middle East. Why did almost nobody in Washington or London recognize it? Because it was packaged as something incredibly boring, something routine. You see, the most dangerous documents in global geopolitics are always the ones that don't look like documents at all. If you want to announce a revolution, you don't do it with fireworks and shouting. If you are Beijing, you hide your revolution in a boring, dry, bureaucratic government press release. But tonight, we are going to do something very simple. We are going to strip away the boring diplomatic words. We are going to look at the raw, unfiltered strategy hiding underneath. I am Professor Jang Shuchin. This is the Jang Report. And over the next few minutes, I am going to reveal a massive secret hidden in plain sight. You are going to see exactly how a single invisible thread connects the deserts of the Middle East, the oil fields of South America, the war rooms of Russia, and the voting halls of Europe. Let us read this document the way it was truly meant to be read, as a declaration of intent from a civilization that is playing a game much, much longer than anyone in Washington is currently prepared to think about. Subscribe now. Share this immediately, because you will not hear this analysis anywhere else tonight. Let's start with the Middle East. In this specific briefing, China addressed the situation in the Strait of Hormuz. For context, right now, the United States military is running aggressive naval operations there. It is a tense, highly guarded, militarized zone. The U.S. Navy is acting as the enforcer of who gets to move through those waters. China's spokesperson stood at the podium and said the Strait of Hormuz must remain, and I quote, stable and open. Emphasized the next words with hand gestures. Not open for some traffic. Not open subject to American enforcement decisions. Just open, full stop. In everyday English, that sounds nice. It sounds peaceful, even passive. But in the highly calibrated language of international diplomacy, that single word is a weapon. Beijing does not use words by accident. Every single statement, every syllable delivered from that podium is reviewed, rewritten, debated, and approved by multiple layers of the Chinese Communist Party's highest political authority before it is ever spoken into a microphone. The word open was placed there intentionally. Someone in Beijing's foreign policy apparatus put it there knowing exactly what it contradicts. Without moving a single warship, without firing a single warning shot, China used an official ministerial press briefing to declare to the world, we do not recognize the American blockade as lawful. But there is a second layer to this. Along with that statement, China relentlessly kept calling for restraint and a ceasefire. Why? Is China just being a pacifist? No. China is building something highly calculated. They are building a reputation ledger. Think of it like a global geopolitical scorecard. Since the end of World War II, the United States has been the undisputed guarantor of global security. But look at how China is currently framing the narrative. Every time there is a crisis, America sends aircraft carriers. America drops bombs. America launches missiles. And on Beijing's scorecard, America gets a negative mark, a debit. It looks like the aggressor. Meanwhile, China stands at a podium in a suit and tie, urging peace, urging de-escalation, urging trade. China gets a positive mark, a credit. It looks like the adult in the room. Day by day, crisis by crisis, China is showing the world this contrast. And what happens to that ledger? it gets cashed in. It gets cashed in at the negotiating table when the fighting inevitably stops and someone has to decide what the post-conflict world looks like. We already saw this happen when China quietly brokered the historic peace deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran. They are laying the groundwork to be the ultimate peace broker of the 21st century. Now let's turn the page of the transcript, because in the exact same briefing, on the exact same day, the spokesperson shifted entirely and started talking about Venezuela. Wait, stop and think about that. Why Venezuela? What does a country in South America have to do with naval conflicts in the Middle East? This is where Beijing's strategy shifts from clever to absolutely brilliant. Look at Venezuela and Iran side by side. What do they have in common? They are both under crushing, suffocating American sanctions. They both have massive hydrocarbon resources, oil and gas. Washington has spent years trying to isolate both of them from the global economy. And crucially, both of them have turned to China for their very survival. When China defends Iran and Venezuela in the exact same breath, it is not a coincidence of scheduling. It is not an accident. It is the public articulation of a brand new global principle. The principle is this: every sovereign nation has the right to sell its resources to the buyer of its choosing, and American sanctions are not international law. Listen to me very carefully right now, because this is the most misunderstood part of global politics. The audience for this message is not Washington, D.C. Beijing does not care if the American president hears this. The real audience is the approximately 150 countries that make up the global South. I am talking about the nations in Africa, South America, and Southeast Asia. These are countries sitting on trillions of dollars worth of gold, lithium, cobalt, and rare earth minerals. For decades, these nations have been forced to manage their economies under the shadow of the US dollar and American conditionality. They are terrified of the US Treasury Department. They know that if they anger Washington, they can be cut off from the SWIFT banking system overnight. Their economies can be turned off like a light switch. They are exhausted, and they are watching China very, very closely. They are asking themselves one simple question: if the United States tries to bully us, will China actually stand by us? If China says Venezuela has sovereign rights, but then backs down from buying Iranian oil the moment America threatens them, the principle collapses. China looks weak. But if China says Venezuela has sovereign rights, and then massive Chinese oil tankers sail right through the Strait of Hormuz, ignoring American sanctions entirely, then the principle is validated with hard evidence. Beijing is offering those 150 countries a guarantee. It is not a military guarantee. It is a financial, economic, and political guarantee. They are offering a golden ticket. China is telling the world, trade with us, price your oil in our currency, the yuan, use our alternative banking systems. And if you do, we will defend your right to survive regardless of what Washington demands. This guarantee, delivered consistently, month after month, and backed by a Chinese economy that these smaller countries desperately depend on, is the foundation of the new coalition China is building. It is not a military alliance like NATO. It is an economic sovereignty bloc. And I promise you, to a developing nation sitting on valuable resources, China's offer is vastly more durable and vastly more appealing than anything American coercive policy can offer as an alternative. This brings us to the most powerful guest to visit Beijing during this diplomatic window, Sergey Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia. How did the Chinese foreign ministry describe this relationship in the briefing? They called it, and again, I quote, comprehensive strategic coordination for a new era. 5 words. Comprehensive strategic coordination for a new era. To the untrained ear, that is just heavy, boring diplomatic jargon. It sounds like a Word document generated by a committee, but let's translate it. Let me give each one of those words the immense geopolitical weight it actually carries. First, comprehensive. This means their partnership is not limited to the war in Ukraine. It is not limited to oil pipelines. It is not limited to any single crisis or geography. It covers every domain, every theater, every active contest, space exploration, deep sea mining, artificial intelligence, cyber warfare, and Arctic shipping routes. Everywhere the American-led order exists, Russia and China are pushing back together. Second, strategic. This means they are not reacting to today's news cycle. They are not doing crisis management. They are oriented towards long-term structural objectives. They are building a geopolitical house that is designed to outlast any single conflict or any single American presidency. Third, coordination. Notice what word is missing here. They did not say alliance. This distinction is deliberate and it is highly sophisticated. China intentionally avoids the constraints of a formal military alliance with Russia. Why? Because formal alliances are like handcuffs. Think of NATO's Article 5. If one goes to war, they all go to war. China does not want to be legally dragged into a war it did not start. By using the word coordination, China gets all the operational benefits of a massive military and economic partnership. Without the legal commitments that limit their flexibility, China can buy Russian oil, supply Russia with dual-use technology, and coordinate with Russia at the United Nations, all while maintaining a formal, polite posture of non-interference to the rest of the world. And finally, new era. These two words are the sun that everything else in the briefing orbits around. When China says new era, it is explicitly announcing that the old era is dead. The era of American hegemony, the era where the United States wrote all the rules, held all the money, and enforced all the boundaries since 1945, China is declaring it over. China is not trying to manage a crisis within the existing global order. They are announcing that what comes next is being built right now. It is being built through these diplomatic engagements. It is being built through the deliberate construction of alternatives to the IMF, the World Bank, and the Western banking system. Lavrov sitting in Beijing is not a polite diplomatic visit. It is a progress meeting. It is a board meeting between the two powers most deeply invested in the proposition that the American era is finished and that the architecture of the replacement system is their shared project. So we have the Middle East. We have the massive resource block of the global South. We have the military and energy coordination with Russia. But to truly paralyze the old world order, China needs to do one more thing. They need to neutralize the West. They cannot defeat the West head-on, so they must ensure the West defeats itself. Which brings us to the final, most cunning piece of the puzzle, Europe. In this very same briefing, amid the talk of Iran and Russia, China took a moment to warmly congratulate the election winners in Hungary, signaling a deep intention to strengthen cooperation. Now, ask yourself, why does Beijing care about Hungary? Hungary is a relatively small country with a small economy. But Hungary has something that China finds incredibly valuable. Hungary is inside the European Union, and Hungary is inside NATO. And under its current government, Hungary is the most consistently pro-China, pro-Russia voice inside both of those Western organizations. To understand the genius of this, you have to understand how the European Union works. In the EU, major foreign policy decisions and major economic sanctions often require unanimous consent. Every country has to agree, which means, from Beijing's perspective, Hungary is a Trojan horse. It is a veto button placed perfectly inside the Western institutional architecture. It is a blocking mechanism available to be activated at precisely the moments when European unity would otherwise produce an outcome that damages Chinese interests. Hungary has repeatedly blocked the EU consensus on sanctions. It has complicated NATO unity on multiple fronts. By investing billions of dollars into Hungarian battery plants and infrastructure, China has effectively bought a geopolitical shield inside Europe. But China is not just playing the right wing. In the exact same week that China was congratulating conservative Hungary, the progressive Prime Minister of Spain visited Beijing to publicly endorse the concept of a multipolar world, which is exactly what China wants. The two governments, Hungary and Spain, represent absolute opposite ends of the European political spectrum. Yet China is successfully cultivating both of them. Different messages, different framings, but the exact same strategic objective: ensure that Europe can never present a unified position. A divided Europe cannot coordinate a unified response to the Hormuz blockade. A divided Europe cannot strictly enforce tech sanctions against Chinese companies. A divided Europe cannot project power into the Indo-Pacific. From Beijing's perspective, a paralyzed, internally divided Europe is the optimal condition. China does not need to conquer Europe. It just needs Europe to stay confused, arguing with itself over internal politics. And Beijing is actively watering the seeds of that division with every single bilateral meeting it conducts. We have reached the end of the briefing. Let's pull back and look at the massive board we have just uncovered. At the beginning of this video, I told you I would reveal the secret hidden in these boring diplomatic statements. I promised you a single thread that connects all of these seemingly random topics. Iran, Venezuela, Russia, Hungary, what is the thread? The thread is the systematic, brick-by-brick, deliberate dismantling of the American-led world order. The problem in the West is a problem of perception. America and Europe are playing a game of geopolitical checkers. Washington is looking at today's news cycle. They are looking at the next midterm election. They are reacting to a single drone strike in the Red Sea or a single protest in a capital city. They measure success by the week. China is not playing checkers. China is playing Wakey, what the West calls Go. In Go, you do not win by aggressively capturing your opponent's pieces in the center of the board. You win by slowly, quietly placing stones around the edges. You surround your opponent over a long period of time. You build infrastructure. You build relationships. You choke off their avenues of escape before they even realize they are trapped. Look at the stones Beijing has placed on the board just in this one briefing. They use a boring press conference to tell Iran, we will buy your oil and shield you from sanctions. They tell the 150 nations of the global south, we will protect your sovereign economy from the US dollar. They tell Russia, we will build the new global operating system with you. They tell Europe, keep fighting among yourselves, and we will do business with whoever is willing. And they wrap this entire grand strategy up in language so incredibly boring, so painfully bureaucratic and routine, that the Western media writes 3 paragraphs about it, publishes it on page 6, and goes to sleep. They are not preparing for World War III in the way Hollywood imagines it. They do not want a loud, catastrophic war. They are executing a silent, steady accumulation of influence. They are building a parallel global economy. They are trying to ensure that by the time America finally wakes up and realizes the rules of the game have changed, the game is already over. The world no longer runs entirely on American rules. The blueprint has been fully published. It is available for anyone to read. The terrifying question is anyone in Washington actually reading it? I am Professor Jang Shuchin. Thank you for watching the Jang Report. If you want to look past the daily headlines and understand the real high-stakes game being played on the global stage, hit the subscribe button right now. Leave a like on this video to defeat the algorithm and share this analysis with someone who needs to see the bigger picture. I will see you next time.